Hello. I'd like to announce that in June 2020 I will be handing over the role of Chosen Chief of the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids. I will have been in that role for 32 years by that point. And over this time, the Order has grown so much into this wonderful body of people who are engaged in all sorts of fantastic initiatives. And much as I would love to continue in the role, I have to accept the fact that I'm not immortal, and that the most responsible thing to do is to hand the role on to a new incumbent whom I can train, who I can be available to as a mentor and guide in the years to come. And so I have chosen a new chosen chief, and we have already begun a process of induction, training, apprenticeship, and that is going to continue for another 2 years until in June 2020 we have a big party at Glastonbury, a ceremony of installation, and a whole new phase of the Order's life will begin. But I will still be around, I'll still be available, still involved in the work of the Order. And so I'd like to introduce you to the new chosen chief to be, whose name is Emer Burke. And I'm sure that those who are listening to this recording or who are watching this video will be interested to find out more about who you are, Emer. So let me ask you a few questions. So Emer, tell me a little bit about how you came to Druidry.
Well, I think my interest in, I suppose, nature-based spirituality came from when I was in Africa. I had worked there in the early 80s, and then I was there again in the mid-90s. And I had met a traditional healer called Shaban, and I had done some work with him. And I was fascinated by the African traditions. And I'd also worked with a Native American medicine woman, also fascinating work. But one of my frustrations was it didn't belong, I suppose, to my own landscape or to my own
You were
tradition.
born in Ireland, were you?
Yes, that's right. So I wanted something that was more belonging to these lands. So I happened to be in a bookshop one day, and synchronously this book hopped out, and it was Cassandra Eason's book, The Modern Day Druidess. And I was really taken with that because it was a very practical, pragmatic book. It didn't tell you have to be deep in the forest to be a druid, but that you could be, in an urban environment and create your own grove in your own apartment, for example. So I read the book, and at the end of the book she mentions OBOD and said that she was a member. But she was a solitary druid, and I thought this suits me perfectly because I don't want to be a member of any order or be with people, which is quite ironic. So I went online then and went to see, well, would I join or not? And at that time I had two choices to make, or two decisions. One was either to do a psychotherapy supervisor's course because I'm a psychologist, psychotherapist, or do this course. I couldn't do both. And one was the sensible right thing, professional thing to do, and the other one was what really, really called
crazy
to
thing
me.
to
That's
do.
right, the crazy thing to me.
Yeah.
So when I clicked on the button for the introductory course, this huge well of joy and yes, this amazing feeling came, shooting up inside me, and I realised, and I'd never had a feeling like that before. And that told me, yes, this is what I need to do. So I did the introductory course, and then of course I signed up for the Bardic grade. And that summer I got my first 4 gwers, and it was the autumn equinox ritual. Shaban, this healer friend, was with us because we've been doing some work with him here. And we did the autumn equinox ritual, and he said, continue doing this. And in a sense, he gave me permission to do this, even though I had just started and didn't know the east from the west. And he just said, this is a key for you, and if you don't use it, the lock will get rusty. So I've continued, and Howard and I continued until...
And you started to have ceremonies at your home.
Immediately.
And now you get lots of people coming.
We started about 3 or 4, and now, well, the most we've had is 48, but
48.
Average about 30 people.
Yeah.
That's who are not necessarily OBODs. So there are more OBODs coming. I think maybe more Irish people join OBOD. But there are many people who come who have a strong resonance with the ceremonies, strong resonance with nature-based spiritual path, who wouldn't recognise themselves as druids, but they're still drawn to this. So to what we do and are very much part of our community.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And before you came to to Druidry? Just say something about what was happening before. What were you doing before?
Well, I am a psychologist, counselling psychologist, so I'm in private practice. And now, originally I was a nurse, so I went to Africa, to Kenya in the early 80s.
So that was your first profession. You started as a nurse.
Yes, as a nurse.
You went to Kenya, did you say?
To Kenya, yes. Yeah. And I became interested in more traditional medicines, but I wasn't allowed. I was in a very kind of medical model place, and I was working with Catholic missionaries who weren't particularly interested in traditional medicine, but my watchman was very interested and he used to teach me. Yeah. So then when I left Kenya, I came back to Ireland and I did a degree in psychology. And then I went to Africa again with my first husband, Eamon. And I became interested I met healers and I joined a meditation group, a healing group. And that, as it were, started me on this path. And then I came back to Ireland and did my master's in counselling psychology. And because of my experience in Africa, I was offered a job as a lecturer in a development studies centre, which also then took me back to Africa, and I taught there for 20 years. Went every year to Tanzania.
Every year to Tanzania, fantastic. Yeah.
And that's where I met Shaban and started again really engaging with him as a traditional healer. And I suppose then that brought me back to Druidry. And then for years I went and I would work with Shaban and visit various traditional healers from different tribes, different traditions, and had initiations with them.
Haven't it? And you've got 2 children?
I have, yeah. Ruan he'll be 20 in July, and Quaylen is 16.
16. And you were married to Howard?
Yes.
Howard.
For 18 and a half years. He passed away almost 3 years ago. Yeah.
Yes, and I remember him so well being at the 50th anniversary. And he came on retreat with us as well. And he was a psychiatrist.
He was a psychiatrist and a GP originally. Yes.
And a GP.
And a psychotherapist.
And a psychotherapist and a Druid.
And a Druid.
And a Druid. And a poet.
And a poet.
And a poet. He was a very talented man. So tell me something of your experience with the bardic grade, for instance. What happened when you started studying the bardic tradition? Because in the orders material, there's a lot of Welsh material and Scottish material, not so much Irish material. What effect did it have on you?
I think that was one of my frustrations was trying to engage with the Welsh mythologies. And what happens with mythology, there's layers and layers and layers, and you're trying to get all the characters and to make sense of them. And I thought, I need to know my own first before I can go into the Welsh. So, I mean, I started, we'd done a lot of that in primary school. I mean, the nuns were great, actually, telling us about all the old myths and legends.
Right.
So I went into it much deeper. And I suppose that's something that is missing from the course that I would hope maybe to contribute to OBOD. I'm also, I suppose, I'm interested in the stories and how they relate to the landscape. And I'm also interested in Irish place names because they give you a sense of the spirit of the place as well. So my experience of the bardic grade was I wanted to be an OBOD because I'm a psychologist. I was doing Reiki, I was doing shamanic training, and I'm not a poet. And I could see Howard writing his poetry, and I couldn't. And funny, after I finished the bardic grade, it took me about 7 years. It took me a long time.
7 years in the bardic grade, which is quite common. Quite a few people.
And that was the longest. I was quicker in the subsequent grades.
Yeah.
As soon as I'd done my review, I was at a gathering of shamans, and I started telling stories.
Right. Yes.
And you're a storyteller. I thought, am I?
Yeah.
And then I also took up the harp then, and
so you play the harp and tell stories,
yes.
And so the bard did awaken in you, if one could say that.
But I'm a late developer, and lots of things I do, so it came afterwards.
It came afterwards, yes. Yeah. And then in the ovate work, of course, you work with herbs as well, don't you?
I do, yes.
Yeah.
So I've stopped seeing people with herbs, but I actually worked with herbs. I still use them for myself. And did Reiki and worked as a shamanic therapist. Now managed to integrate all of that, not the herbs so much, but the shamanic work and the Reiki into my practice as a psychologist. It doesn't look like it, but that's what it's there. It's kind of some of the pillars and the supports for my work as a psychologist.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. So maybe you can say a little bit about what OBOD means to you. Well,
I joined OBOD in 2003, and I didn't get involved in any of the activities because I was in Ireland, and then I did 2 of the weekends, the ritual and meditation for Druids, and that was with Kate and Barry Riley. Really, really enjoyed those. And still, I didn't go to any of the camps because they clashed with my own ceremonies that I was holding at home. So in 2011, I went to my first summer gathering, and I've been going ever since. And for me, OBOD has been very much a second home. And it's really interesting for me because I'm Irish, and I was brought up, with in history, about how awful the English were to the Irish people. And I've come to experience a deeper rooted connectedness with Ireland through my connection with OBOD here. And so, I mean, I go to both. I go 4 times a year. I come to the UK.
You come to each of the Glastonbury gatherings.
Each of the gatherings, and then I go to the Druid Gorset. I suppose I've been to 4. I went to the first Ovate Gorset in 2010. I think that was the first Ovate Gorset, and then the next time I was on the Druid grade, and then I've been going on the OBOD retreats. And
what's your experience? Why do you keep coming back? I mean, what?
Well, it feeds me. It's like a second family, and I mean, there's a range of people that I would never have met otherwise. And also my other Druid colleagues will say, these are my people, this is my tribe, this is my home. And that really, really resonates with me. I really like the people. I love the ceremonies. I get quite high on them. I love the way OBOD is... I suppose there's nothing wrong with OBOD. I don't see anything, as if taking over this role as CC, that anything needs fixing. So for me, it has worked very, very well. I have felt I belong. I haven't been aware of a hierarchy. I haven't been controlled. I've been free to explore my own spiritual path. I have found friends. The gatherings are always well organised. They're very, very well held. And the responsibility is shared out among so many people. And that I really, really like. So I'm coming in, taking over something that's working very, very well, which actually is a lovely situation to get into, because I mean, many people who take over organisations, often they have to clean them up or transform them.
Fix them in some way.
Fix them, exactly.
Yes.
And for me, what I've liked around, this is my perception of your holding of it, is that you're rather permissive, a kind of a stand back approach, which I think works very, very, very well, because there are so many competent people who hold the space with you. And it's always struck me that if an outsider came on the tour to look at a ceremony, nobody'd know who the chosen chief was. And that is something I value about OBOD. And I hope perhaps that I will be
continue
able
to
continue that, because I tend to be permissive in terms of my managing of things. Obviously, if there's a crisis or something, I will kick in. But it's lovely to know that there's a cohort of people who support me in my role, and that people do their job so well. So it's been actually a family that works very well. Not all families are functioning, are functional, but I feel I'm nourished here, and that's very, very important. I mean, I come 4 times a year, which is a lot to travel, and it's been really, really important. So I feel I belong here in some ways, and yet my home is in Ireland.
Yeah.
I'm not moving here.
Yes.
But this is like very much a second home.
That's lovely. That's lovely. And I think you're right. This idea of permissive, in the sense of empowering others. I think one of the sort of guiding principles has always been, for me, has been that it's about empowering other people. It's not about lording it over them, but empowering them. And as you say, always being ready to step in if needed. But most of the time, the trick is the opposite, which is to step back. And I think I learnt that, of course, that's a huge thing in psychotherapy. As a therapist, you learn how to hold the space, which is sounds terribly vague, doesn't it? But it's actually really a meaningful thing. Like taking responsibility, being fully present, fully there, but also allowing...
And nobody knowing you're doing it.
Nobody knowing you're doing it. It's not a big deal from other people's point of view. And yet, if necessary, you're there. You're fully present, and you're there. And that's hugely important, and it's lovely, and it's lovely that you absolutely get that, and you want to continue in that. in that way. It's something that, a teacher, I think, when I trained in Montessori education as well, that's one of the principles in Montessori education, is that you empower the children by getting out of their way, but always being there in the event of need and so on.
And I suppose another thing I value about OBOD is, okay, we have our 3 grades. Nobody ever asks anyone, what grade are you on? It doesn't come up in conversation. Okay, you might know if you're going to the Grove meetings, who's who, but so it's not important. And yet, regardless of what grade you are, you have roles to play and roles of responsibility or gifts to offer the order, which I just absolutely love and value. So there isn't that sense of hierarchy, which is something I think is one of the strengths of OBOD.
There was somebody, I've forgotten who said it, but something said one of the points of having power is to be able to give it away. And
Absolutely.
I think that's exactly the role of the chief, is not to hang on to the power, but actually to give it away. Yeah.
And I mean, I think there needs to be one leader, and then the rest hold the space and do the leadership with the leader. But there needs to be one accountable person. That's the wrong word, but one person, that go-to person. But the rest of the leadership and the management is held by everybody else who wants to do it. Not everybody wants to be a leader, but there are enough, my sense is, enough people within OBOD holding that role. When you see how people run the ceremonies, okay, it's on a 3-year cycle. I think they're run very well. There've been very, very good people with.
These are the ceremonies in Glastonbury,
and whoever else, and JJ and Adrian at the mistletoe ceremony. They're held very, very well, and then they know who to go to.
Absolutely.
To hold that.
And I think another thing that happens with OBOD, this idea of it being a family, a sort of ecosystem or an organized, a family, is that people gravitate towards areas that they feel really comfortable in. Somebody feels like they would love to do a magazine. Exactly. Or would love to, help with the Grove, or to, work on a website or whatever it is, and our job, or your job as chief, is to facilitate that and to assist people and support people to find where they feel the most comfortable.
Yeah, and I will look forward to hearing from people in terms of what they're doing. It's not about looking for permission to do something, but it's actually nice to hear about people's
initiatives. There are all sorts of fantastic initiatives in OBOD, yeah. And one of the interesting characteristics of OBOD is often people do initiatives and they're so involved in it, they sort of forget to tell us, which is okay. It's just lovely to hear from them if somebody's done, created an amazing website, or
an e-zine or whatever it is, yes,
or event or whatever. It's just lovely
to hear about it. Yeah, because I think there's a wealth of talent, and creativity in OBOD, which is wonderful. So Philip, how are you feeling about this change? Because I mean, you've been chosen chief for 30 years, and this is going to be a big difference in your life.
It is. It's a big change, but it feels absolutely right. It feels like this cycle, 32-year cycle. It feels absolutely the right time to hand over. The order is flourishing, and I think you'll be a wonderful person to take on the leadership. And the way I see it as well is I don't feel sad about it. Of course, I've enjoyed it tremendously, but I feel But I think the analogy that comes to me, it's a bit like the dean of a university, you're becoming the dean, as it were. He's handing over the deanship, but I shall still be on the campus doing research, writing, and so on. So I plan to, with the time that this frees up for me, I plan to do a lot more writing, more research, carry on doing talks, workshops, and so on. So I'm really excited about it, and the reason I am as well is because I think you'll be so good at it. You share a similar perspective to me. You have the psychologist's lens that you look at, and also the esoteric, the magical, the druidic. And I think it's really important to have those two. They balance each other.
They do indeed, yes.
So well, The magic brings a kind of freshness and a poetry, and the psychological viewpoint brings a kind of groundedness, commonsensical perspective, And as well, we have a shared history too in our connection with Ireland, and with Olivia Robertson. I first went to Ireland when I was 17 and then 18, and then when I was 19, late 18, I went over to Ireland to live at Huntington Castle, where Olivia was. And I remember as the boat came to Ireland, there was this huge rainbow, and it was just wonderful. I felt I was going to live there forever. I was just completely in love with Ireland. And I worked with Olivia, and you came to know her. That was before she started the Fellowship of ISIS. You came to know her a little bit later.
Much later, yes. Actually 2010, yeah.
But we've both sort of been influenced by her teachings, her perspective, her philosophy.
Indeed, yes.
And so that feels really good, I think. And I'm just looking forward to this new phase in the life of the Order, and I'm looking forward tremendously to the party that we'll have, the celebration.
As indeed I am.
Yes, absolutely. The installation ceremony and the Eisteddfod afterwards.
Yes.
It'll be wonderful.